Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to 2025. I think this is going to be a really pretty exciting year. We should start to see a lot of the new cool dual sport and adventure bikes that we've been talking about here on the channel showing up at dealerships. I would really like to get some eyes on them. Definitely would like to throw a leg over a couple of them and take them for rides. I may even purchase one, but of course we've got to finish up the DR and XR builds. We'll be doing some adventure mods to them, then taking them out camping, and once that's all ready to go, then we can finally get onto the performance mods. We'll also be doing some suspension work on the DR650, so that should be really pretty exciting. I cannot wait to get that stuff done and get back out on those bikes and into the woods. But before we do that today, I want to take a look back at what was probably, well, the biggest, scariest, most exciting year in my entire YouTube career, and probably even my entire career since I started working. If you guys remember back to that very first video that I put out in early January of 2024, I was on the KLR still, actually, because I hadn't traded it for the DR650 yet, and essentially what I was doing was apologizing to you guys because I was sort of in the transition period, going from basically just sort of goofing around and making motorcycle videos to turning this into, well, basically a career for myself. I have had to make some pretty big content changes in order to I guess pay the bills and kind of stay afloat and make this even viable. And if you guys are unfamiliar, I left my 40-hour-a-week engineering job about a year ago now, that I worked at for over 12 years. I left it to do this, to give this a shot. I also started a side business that, to be honest, I focused so much on that, well, progress on the YouTube side of things has been pretty slow, and it hasn't been until just the last couple months where I just kind of really haven't had a whole lot of work to do. And of course, at that time, I had no way of knowing that just 2 short months later, my design business would essentially, well, not really have much of any work to do. In March of 2024, I think I worked about 15 hours on stuff that wasn't YouTube. And since I had left my engineering career at that point, it was basically, well, a now or never type moment. And that is when my wife and I decided, well, mostly my wife decided, that it was time to finally give this dream that I had had for the last 8 years a shot. And of course, with all of that eating away at me in the back of my mind, I basically needed to come up with some sort of way to create content from my desk since it was midwinter, and that's sort of where I came up with the motorcycle comparison videos, and those served really kind of a nice dual purpose. I was able to sort of look at the views on those videos in the comments and sort of gauge interest in the variety of different bikes that I was considering moving to for my next build and test bike. And luckily it was a pretty light winter for snow, so I was able to get out and ride a couple times. And while it didn't do nearly as well as I had hoped, I really had a good time taking the TW out and making that video where I was riding around when it was basically 0 degrees out.
See what happens when we go a little faster. Turn signal off. High speed TW mode engaged. Hopefully that back camera stays on. Well, I am surprisingly comfortable at 50 miles an hour, I've got to say. What's minimum speed on the highway? 45, I think? We're doing okay. Just want to tighten those cameras down a little bit more. We try for 55. On the downhill, look at that.
Then I took the 701 Enduro up north and did one of my, honestly, favorite wintertime rides ever. I think a lot of it was just the scenery and the geography and the trails that I was riding on. I basically just was able to kind of cruise around on some sort of crusty, snowy trails and found a really, really cool set of trails right next to a river, and did even just some gravel that was, I guess, covered in snow and ice. It was really fun. It ended up being a really kind of a long ride, and I ended up getting back to the cabin that we were staying at super late and had to basically rush to get to dinner with my wife yet. And honestly, I don't know why I liked it so much. It just, I think, felt a bit more like the adventures that I used to take, where I would just go out and explore new territory and never really knew what I was going to find. And a lot of the rides that I take now when I'm testing bikes, I don't get to do that because I'm intentionally going to a place that I know will be good for whatever test that I'm starting to do. But I think next year I'm going to try to do more rides like that, where I just go out and explore new areas, because that's really what got me into dual sport motorcycles in the first place. And then, having let those KLR comparison videos sort of simmer for a few months, in early March I made an important decision that basically set the tone and trajectory for the rest of 2024.
Well, boys, I finally did it. We've got a new bike. It only took me, like 4 or 5 different KLR comparison videos to realize that maybe the big bore dual sports is where I am best suited to continue my investigation.
And since I had gotten about an hour and a half of seat time just getting the XR back home, I figured the next logical step would be to take the KLR back out and sort of do a real-life comparison between the two, but, well, it ended up taking me over a week to get back out on the KLR.
And there's a very good explanation for that. My wife and I decided that this would be the year we would get back into skiing and snowboarding, and like I mentioned in a short the other day, we had a little bit of an accident. One of us ended up with a broken arm, two broken bones in their arm, needed surgery, 10 screws, and some heavy pain medication that, well, made the decision to wean our youngest very easy, and did not make nights for me very easy. Usually my wife takes care of our kids that wake up still 4 times a night, and easily puts my daughter back to sleep by feeding her, which obviously I'm not equipped to do, so I have not been getting much sleep at all.
And with that out of the way, as much as it hurt me to do it, it was time to post the KLR 650 for sale, so I put it on Facebook Marketplace and began to wade through all of the "is this still available" questions, and of course all of the lowball offers. And in the meantime, my wife had sort of started to be, well, a little bit more self-sufficient and was able to take care of herself and the kids without me needing to be around too much, so I headed back to the garage to do a few things to the XR so I could take it out for its first big adventure ride. I used what I learned in my high school small engine repair class to check the valves since the bike was past the 600-mile mark. I also replaced the stock 15-tooth sprocket with a 15-tooth sprocket from Primary Drive, and that is a sprocket that completely contacts the entire surface area of the spline, whereas the stock sprocket here, the splines are obviously much thinner, the spline portion is much thinner. And as nice as that big red Clark tank would have been for my long adventure rides, I figured it was worth sticking the stock tank back on there since it came with the bike anyway. I figured that way I could get a little bit better feel for how that bike would work in the situations that I plan on riding it in when it was completely stock. And of course, as some of you guys might remember, that was much easier said than done. I think swapping a tank back to the stock one would be fairly straightforward, but apparently not, because at some point the fastener that's supposed to hold that down got busted off in there. So that ought to be fun. I guess we'll test out my easy out taps. Basically, this is threaded in reverse, so when I stick this in here and start to twist it counterclockwise, the way that the fastener is going to want to come out, then it's actually going to drill itself deeper down into the fastener. Now, those of you that have either seen the video or have had any experience with easy out taps probably know exactly what's about to happen here. A lot of you said that I should have basically at this point took the tap handle off and gave the tap a few raps with a metal hammer just to sort of loosen up any of the, I guess I can't think of the term, electrolysis? That's not right. But basically the two dissimilar metals, the bolt and the threaded hole that it's in, basically are kind of stuck together, and by smacking it with a hammer you can sometimes loosen that grip up. But of course, as I put in the beginning of all my videos now, I am not a motorcycle mechanic. I do have quite a bit of experience under my belt wrenching on things, but most of that is all just self-taught knowledge and learning through my own mistakes, which I'm about to make here. Excellent.
Just what I wanted.
And of course, that was absolutely the last thing that I wanted, because the only thing worse than drilling through a bolt is trying to drill through a tap or an easy out. Luckily, I'm pretty sure I bought these from Menards, and they were pretty soft metal, which again may have had something to do with why it snapped so easily. It may have also had something to do with the fact that I was a little bit too afraid to drill too far into that bolt, because on the other side of the bolt was just a little bit of frame, and then on the inside of the frame on the XR as well, the bike's oil storage. But somehow I was miraculously able to drill through it and got the Tusk thread repair kit installed, put the tank on, and then we headed out for the very first adventure ride on the XR 650L.
Wow, 74 miles to reserve. Oh no.
And if you guys have seen the XR650L recently, you know that that poor range still was not enough to convince me to take that beautiful XR tank back off and swap it for the Clark tank. I may someday buy a somewhat matching decal and a white tank. At that point in time, I was much more concerned about getting the handlebars a little bit higher up and a little bit further away from myself. I've got an old back injury from smashing myself into the side of Granite Peak after launching off an icy jump on a snowboard. So I tried out a couple 7/8 to 1 1/8 risers with a couple different bars and landed on the Rocks offset risers with the Tusk Chub bar in the Moto Bend. And to protect both my hands and my levers, of course, we installed the Tusk D-Flex Adventure handguards. And I was really pretty happy with the results, both ergonomically and aesthetically. And that brings us to the very end of March, which, if you guys remember from the beginning, was the last month that I did any sort of work for my 3D freelance design business. As I mentioned, things had started to slow down even 3 months before March. I knew things were probably going to come to an end sometime soon. I didn't know when. I also didn't really try to find any other work because I was sort of taking that as a sign that maybe it was finally time to stop doing this part-time or half-ass and really just throw everything that I had at the channel. I'd also been getting a lot of offers to test e-bikes, which seemed like a good way to make some income, still be able to make some videos, and I actually ended up learning a ton about editing and making videos and sort of telling stories from making those videos. And I know a lot of you guys aren't really too interested in them, which is totally fine. I'm not trying to sell anyone an e-bike unless of course you want one. I've just really always been interested in bikes in general, and the fact that I can ride something off-road at really some awesome trails, it just didn't seem like it made any sense to not take them up on their offers, especially if it would help me to continue doing what I absolutely love doing. And once my wife had finally convinced me that the time was indeed now and that I should go for it, we figured that I should pick something else up to sort of build and test alongside of the XR. And of course, I had always wanted a DR650. You guys have been telling me for years when I was riding the KLR that I should try one. And to be honest, I never actually stopped looking for DR650s even after I purchased my very first KLR. I always sort of had it in the back of my mind that if I came across the right deal, that I would buy one. And at this point in time, of course, I was really pretty nervous about spending any money, which I suppose is probably why I sort of took the shot in the dark and asked one of the guys that was selling a DR650 at the time if he'd be interested in trading for my KLR 650, and, well,
Lo and behold, not only does he want to trade, but he's seen the bike in videos before, and seems like he's pretty pumped about it. So he rode about an hour, like I did, and is supposed to be meeting me at the Citgo here. We're a little early for once in my life. Oh, he still beat me here, though.
Now, at this point in time, I don't know who was more excited, you guys or me. I thought this was just the coolest opportunity to be able to test both bikes that were sort of on, well, kind of the other end of the spectrum from the KLR in the big bore dual sport class. I'd always really thought they were kind of the same until I hopped on the XR and realized how different it was. And now looking back, I do sort of wish that I would have ridden the DR650, or I guess traded for the DR650 first before riding the XR650, and maybe it wouldn't have changed anything, but now I just always feel like when I'm riding the DR, it's sort of overshadowed by the fact that I went from the sort of big heavy road bike being the KLR to the sort of off-road monster being the XR, and then the step in between just sort of seemed, well, kind of meh. But I do honestly believe that once I do some suspension work on the DR, a lot of the stuff that I don't like about it is going to completely go away. And of course, once we sort of speed up the ability of the DR to kind of rev up, I think it should be a lot more fun and a bit more like the XR. And honestly, as much as I like the XR for how fun it is, it's really, well, a bit less comfortable than the DR. And on the first adventure test that we took the DR650 out on, which was the same exact adventure test that I took the XR out on, there were, of course, a number of things that I noticed that, well, I like to this day a lot better about the DR. One, of course, being that the tank on the DR650 is a little bit larger, and since it actually gets quite a bit better gas mileage, I can usually do most of my adventure rides with only one stop at a fuel station, and sometimes I can even get away without stopping at all, which is super nice. And the other thing really changed how I looked at the XR and sort of changed the trajectory of that build as well.
Oh, boys, I love the DR650. I wonder, if the XR, the height maybe almost makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know, and one of you guys have been telling me that you've got an XR that you lowered quite a bit and that you really like it. And I mean, if you don't need the ground clearance, honestly, being a little bit lower to the ground is going to be better on the road. Off-road, I mean, it really depends what you're doing, I think. But it does seem like, I don't know, I am maybe just more used to a bike like this. Just because I'm not used to a bike like the XR, which is kind of like a motocross bike.
And then if you guys remember when I took both the DR and the XR out on the same day to sort of get a feel for how they compared one right after the other on my dual sport test circuit, I realized that low center of gravity feeling on the DR really was something that I thought was worth chasing after.
And that's not like that's any secret. I mean, anything that you look at as far as a performance motorcycle or car or four-wheeler or anything, if you want better handling, you lower it. I mean, that's the best way to get your weight down low, get everything kind of planted. It feels better, even if the suspension isn't as good. So I think that's why when I get on this bike and I get on gravel, I just want to go, where the XR, I just feel more reserved, and I think that honestly is because of that top heaviness.
So I decided that at that point in time, it was probably something that I would do, but there were still some other things that I wanted to do to the XR, like put the new Tusk Waypoint tires that had just came out at that point. So I got them spooned onto the XR rims as quickly as I could, and I decided to use the, well, talcum powder method that I had been suggested to by one of you guys. I thought it was worth a shot, and it definitely worked, but it seemed like the sort of wider profile Tusk spoons that I was using during that install, mixed with the, well, sort of lack of lubrication from just using the talc powder, sort of, well, caused a few problems. But anyway, once those were spooned on, my dad and I headed up to a really kind of neat area that allowed us to test a bit of some kind of curvy roads and some gravel, along with some, well, pretty messy, muddy trails.
Oh, you can hop that easy.
Maybe over there.
Oh no, you go right down the middle. I'll show them. Okay, this was a dumb idea. Huh. Okay.
Then for some wind protection and to sort of give me a place to put a few accessories like my W702 CarPlay unit from CarPride, we added the Hemisphere Off-Road Rally windscreen, which is still one of my favorite mods. And I know some of you guys aren't a huge fan of how it looks on the bike, but in person, to me anyways, it just really gives the bike a nice retro rally feel, and I think honestly does match the rest of the aesthetic that that bike comes with. And then in somewhat of an attempt to justify keeping the 701 Enduro, which is literally almost twice the cost of the XR in the DR, I took it around that same dual sport test circuit just to sort of see how it would compare.
This thing, it definitely doesn't need any performance increases. Whoa, yeah, okay. Not on the XR, not on the DR, we're on the 701. Oh man, I think I'm gonna have to get rid of it just for that reason. This thing, this is just an insane motorcycle.
And somewhat to my surprise and delight, that video actually ended up doing pretty well, and it sort of sparked some interest in another bike that I had ridden previously. You guys asked how the 701 Enduro compared to my old Tenere 700, which of course I had since sold to my dad. But before I did that, as a lot of you guys probably remember, I did quite a few performance mods to it.
And even before then, this thing had, well, more than enough power.
And of course, as much as I still love the Tenere 700, there was a very specific reason that I decided to move away from 460-pound bikes like that and move to lighter bikes like the 701 Enduro, which is only 340 some pounds, and sort of to kind of prove my point and to get, well, a good comparison video out there, we took both the Tenere 700 and the 701 up to some of my favorite trails to test how they did off-road.
Holy shit.
And as much as my dad loves riding the T7 on those Harrison Hills ATV trails, even he had to admit that when he went from that bike to the much lighter 701 Enduro, it was a bit more of a sort of easier going experience, and depending on what you're looking for, really can be a lot more fun. But of course, there's always that on-off-road trade-off, which is why with the XR650L and its new adventure trim, we decided to take both it and the Tenere 700 up to those Harrison Hills trails again, that time not loading them onto a trailer, but instead riding them the hour or so up there to see both how they would compare on the road and off.
Okay, so this is much wider, much lower, and much more stretched out. Guess I got to speed limit a little quicker than Cherry did, but surprisingly, not that much more exhilarating than the XR. I don't know, maybe I just really like the XR. This definitely feels, I mean, just glued to the road and kind of almost like stuck in a straight line, where the XR is kind of high off the ground, and it feels incredibly solid for what it is, but for what it is 12 inches off the ground at the lowest part of the frame, so you have to expect something a bit different than a 460-pound Tenere. The wind protection, yeah, is definitely better. All right, let's see if I built myself a worthy rally bike here. Whoa, there's a big old rock. This thing definitely picks up more vibration towards the top of the RPMs. Woo! Ooh, sure takes those jumps nice though. As far as comparisons to other bikes like the KLR, woo, and the T7, I mean, this feels so much more capable and light.
But then after another 2.5 or so hours of seat time, both off and then on road to get back home, I started to notice a few faults.
Oh. So, Status report. I would say the worst part of the ride was probably the discomfort I was feeling in my backside. The angle that the seat is at just, it's not great for long distance travel.
I also noticed that the sort of high and far back foot pegs on the XR made me, well, a little bit cramped, and I think some of that maybe has to do with the fact that the seat concept seat is about an inch lower than stock. I think having a slightly higher seat maybe would help that, but even at 5'10 with a 31-inch inseam, I do feel sort of cramped on that bike. And the stock bars on the DR650 were also making me feel a bit cramped, so we got to work on that bike, again, trying out a few different sets of bars and risers. So I think maybe it's just that I've got it in my head now and just can't quite let it go, but for some reason it just feels like these bars are maybe a little bit too high. I just kind of felt like on the gravel that it sort of made me, I don't know, a little bit less comfortable. So I actually stole the Rocks offset risers off of the XR, put them on the DR with the Tusk Chubb KTM bend bars.
What a gorgeous day for a ride. Cannot complain about having to come out here and test these twice, and I really have nothing to complain about with these KTM bend bars on the Rocks offset risers. This is where I want to be, and I'm pretty surprised at myself that didn't go with the higher bars. I mean, usually I kind of try to go as high and far forward as I can, and maybe those bars would have felt a bit better on these risers, but again, these did pick the center portion of the bar up and shove it forward, and I really didn't want those ATV high bend bars any further up. It seems like on the road and the gravel, I'm just a little bit more comfortable with these.
And then it was finally time to lower the XR650L to see if it would be a little bit better off with a slightly lower center of gravity, similar to the DR650. So I loosened up the triple tree clamps and slid the fork tubes up, which there is a certain amount of room there left from Honda. That dropped it about 3/4 of an inch in the front. And then in the rear, I used the Hemisphere adjustable off-road lowering link, which can be adjusted anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of drop. I left it in the 1-inch drop position, and then took the bike out for a test ride on my dual sport test circuit.
Well, I've got to say, man, I have noticed absolutely zero in the way of negative effects out on the road, and man, out on the gravel, I'm almost a little afraid to say it, but I swear this thing feels just as good as the DR. Man, everything seems better. The seating position, the fact that I can sort of sit back on the back portion of the seat, it almost makes me want to lower this even a little bit more, either a half inch or maybe even the whole inch.
And as great as that lower center of gravity feel was, and as nice as it was to actually be able to comfortably reach the ground, I knew we still needed to take the bike on some more serious off-road trails to see how lowering especially the rear would affect the bike's handling on some bigger jumps. So my buddy Jason and I headed up to Harrison Hills ATV trails to see how it performed.
Yeah, I'm not quite that bold yet.
Well, I haven't got a whole lot of air, but I gotta say, I'm certainly feeling, I think, just as confident as I was last time when this thing was in its stock height configuration. I'm not noticing anything at all. I mean, if there's anything at all, it's minuscule enough that it doesn't even register, so.
Yeah, you definitely caught some air. It's on my film.
Also swapped bikes so I could sort of feel how his DR felt in comparison and to get his thoughts on the newly lowered XR.
Ooh, that does feel different. Certainly
Yeah,
more.
the seat's really wide.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, and this is definitely squishier.
All right, neutral, start. So far, so good.
Oh yeah, that feels way different.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Why is that so much different? That's strange.
I don't like that I can't like see my front wheel.
Yeah, you really can't, I suppose, can you? If you stand up, you can, but seated, it definitely is in the way. How does that feel for like top heaviness? Do you notice that it's any worse?
No. I just noticed that my feet feel really high.
This thing might still feel a little bit more nimble. I don't know. Either way, I mean, it's a pretty noticeable difference on the XR having it lowered like that. I should have had you get on it sometime before I lowered it, but oh well. You want to switch back?
Yeah, if you want.
Yeah, that definitely feels different. Oh my gosh, yeah, those pegs are so high. Weird.
Yeah, it feels bouncy, like just like going through the rolling hills. I feel myself just constantly like bouncing up and down.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's definitely a bit more solid, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels like you're on like like clapped out car, you know, where it's just bouncing everywhere.
And then both Dork in the Road and Spite's Corner put out videos on the KTM 690, which, if you guys are unfamiliar, is very similar to my Husqvarna 701, as well as the Gas 700. They're basically the same thing, more or less. So I decided I should hop on my 701 and take it out for a ride and sort of share my experiences and opinions on that bike. And then I don't know if it was just the fact that I had sort of poked fun at them a little bit during the beginning and I was a little bit nervous about upsetting someone because I really did just mean it all in good fun, or if it was the fact that I ran into a bit of a rainstorm.
This isn't going to be good. This is too much rain.
But what I meant to say was, because my bike was lowered 2.5 inches from the previous owner and has some really aggressive Tusk D-Sport tires on it, I think it just makes the bike, well, so much better of a machine, at least for adventure type riding. A lot like the XR, I'm sure it would be much better if you're really doing some serious enduro type riding, but for the, well, basic trail riding that I do, and even some of the Harrier single track at my skill level, it just feels so much better as it is. And I think both of those guys honestly would probably like the bike a lot better if they were able to ride it in the same configuration that my bike is in. And since that video did really well, I decided to take it out alongside Jason's DR650 on some single track trails. Unfortunately, before we got out, well, it started to rain quite a bit, and I really still feel pretty bad about dragging my buddy Jason through those trails on those awful stock tires that the DR came with.
Yeah, this is not going well. It'd be easier to walk it.
Yeah, sometimes that's the best decision. Oh.
Oh, that's not good. Oh yeah, I got this, no problem. As I'm watching you struggle.
Yeah, this is insane here. This is so rocky.
Oh boy. Oh,
You on your side?
yep. Oh, that hurt.
You okay?
I think so, but banged the shin again, like in the same spot, I think.
Oh no.
Oh, that hurt.
Yeah, definitely not the right time and place for that bike with those tires and a rider that only has 5 or 6 off-road rides under his belt. That was really a mistake, and we both thought that we would be able to get a ride in there since it was a little bit closer to home than where we had originally planned on going before the rain hit, but obviously that wasn't the case. I believe it was right after that ride Jason did buy a set of motocross boots, and we later put a different set of tires on his bike that should be much, much better for a lot of the rides that we plan on doing. And I actually gave him the Tusk D-Flex handguards that came on my DR650, and we put those on, I believe, right after that ride. Actually, definitely should have been beforehand, but again, we were in a hurry because of the rain. I did get a little bit of enjoyment out of that ride, although it certainly was a bit of a struggle for me as well.
Oh, we're sitting on something there. It sounded like metal. Not just foot peg, huh? I knew I could do it.
Next, I put the 14-tooth primary drive sprocket on the XR and sort of checked out the original 15-tooth primary drive that I put on there, as well as the shaft that it rides on. And since the splines and everything looked good, we headed out for another ride up to some really kind of cool trails with my dad on the Tenere 700, and I really, really enjoyed every single part of that. My dad, on the other hand, I don't know if it was due to the heat or more so just the giant bike that he was sort of trying to keep up with me on those kind of messy trails, but he was definitely having a bit of a hard time.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Getting tired.
Is that why you're wondering if we're gonna be done? Because
Yeah.
you wore out? What?
Sort of, but I can go further.
Yeah. Yeah, we should be. This will be the last bit of ATV trail, and after that, it'll be road.
And I think throughout the year, especially with the time that I let him ride the DR650, it seems like he's maybe thinking that maybe I'm going in the right direction with these lighter big bore thumpers rather than the kind of bigger, heavier adventure bikes. Then we went out and did wheelies on every bike that I owned. First up was the TW200. Then the DR650, the XR650, and finally the very powerful 701 Enduro. And I suppose I didn't really mention it in this video yet, but right away, actually I guess on the way home from picking up the DR650 after doing some wheelie practice, I noticed that the fork tube on one side was leaking really pretty bad and the other side had kind of a slow leak. And initially I thought maybe it was something that I missed during the test ride, but it seems like they were just kind of getting old. It seemed that, I think not the guy that I got it from, but the guy before him actually had put ATF in it, which is why the fluid was red when we dumped it out. But anyways, that really was kind of a cool, nice opportunity that I've sort of been waiting for a long time. I've always wanted to learn how to do fork seals, but never really had the time or the right tools to do it. So thanks to my sponsor, Rocky Mountain ATV, I got some tools and really ended up being pretty glad that I decided to give it a shot. Really wasn't all that bad. Definitely, I think something that you need some instructions to follow, which I did follow the Rocky Mountain video, but that felt pretty good to kind of get that under my belt. And then I think because I had done a review on the CarPride W702 CarPlay unit on the XR, Speedle, another CarPlay company, had contacted me and wanted to know if I wanted to do a review on their sort of ridiculous CarPlay unit that came with a front and rear camera and tire pressure sensors. So I decided to accept it just so I could kind of get a feel for a different brand to kind of compare the two. And since it was sort of an over-the-top type unit, I figured I should really put it on the most over-the-top bike that I have, which is of course the 701. And then to test it out, I took it out for one of the most beautiful sort of sunset cruises that I was on all year. We also did a bit of fishing, and really that video does just kind of stand out in my mind as one of my favorites. Then I did a video where I installed some auxiliary lights wired into the high beam circuit on the XR, and after that my dad and I took both the XR and the DR up to Harrison Hills again, and that time we trailered up there so we could do a lot of off-road riding to see what the two bikes felt like in comparison, again keeping in mind that the XR had been lowered, and that was really, I think, a great way to sort of get a good feel for how that modification as well as just the two bikes in general sort of compared. And sort of to my surprise, as much as my dad had been enjoying the DR, it actually turned out that he liked the XR much better now. And I don't know if you guys remember, but on the way home with the DR650, I actually said that I was going to sort of put that build off and focus on the XR. But since the XR was really feeling pretty darn good, and a lot of you guys were asking for some DR650 videos, I ended up doing a, well, sort of a quick test on an adventure style rig for the front of that bike, and we also put the 14-tooth sprocket on that, and then took it out for a nice long test ride on the Harrison Hills ATV trails. And as good as that somewhat universal GPS bar and windshield worked on the DR, my long-term plan for that I think still is maybe to do some sort of rally tower on that bike. I'm not 100% sure that that's the route that I'm going to go. I did also end up sort of putting out a comparison video between the DR650 and actually the very first dual sport motorcycle that I ever purchased, which was a DRZ 400, and then that sort of just kind of snowballed in the last couple months because shortly after that, you guys let me know that there were some rumblings that there may be a new DRZ for 2025, and of course it turned out that there was. So I've done a lot of videos on that, and it was never really my plan, but now it's almost kind of seeming like it would be silly not to pick up the new DRZ 4S, so I'm still not exactly sure what I'm going to do with that. I think it really would be cool if they would put out a rally concept somewhat similar to the rally concept that I put out. And if you guys didn't catch that, or if you didn't get to watch it all the way through, essentially what I'm hoping Suzuki does is add a rally tower and some sort of wraparound fairing to cover up a gas tank. Maybe the fairing could even be a gas tank. And then if you guys are unaware, there are aftermarket companies that are essentially already producing a wide range gear set that people are just dropping right in the old DRZ, so I don't really see any reason why Suzuki couldn't also do something very similar. A lot of people will ask for a 6-gear, but a 6-gear would make that whole case wider and heavier, and if people are already enjoying a wider range 5-speed, I think, at least from my experience with the XR and the DR, that I've now geared down to a 14-tooth and they still run great on the highway at 70 miles an hour plus. I think it just makes the most sense, especially if you're trying to keep a bike light and thin. And since the plan has always been to try to build both the XR and the DR into bikes that can handle everything from highway to single track, I did some modifications to the XR to sort of bulletproof the bottom side and the sides of that bike for the rocky single track trails that I planned. So we went with the Hemisphere off-road bash plate and the side covers. And then my dad and I took that bike to the 2-mile loop of really pretty nasty single track at Tigerton.
Some of the trails, you look at them, it's like, holy crap, I can't go down this.
Luckily, the DR650 already came with a skid plate and some side protection on it, but I figured I should add some linkage protection, so I used the Tusk linkage guard, which also ended up being sort of long enough that I could use it as sort of a glide plate underneath the entirety of the skid plate, and that turned out to be a really good thing when we went out and tested that bike.
Oh, there's the skid plate. There we go.
Oh, you used it?
I did, yeah.
Maybe you do a little maintenance on the tires while you got it up there.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, there you go. Well, I made that all worth it. Perfect.
And even though I'd always known that the sort of mushy suspension on the DR650 would eventually need to be upgraded, it wasn't until I rode both of those bikes on that single track, and you can actually just kind of see that watching both of those bikes go up that really steep hill. The XR just takes it really pretty well, always sort of keeping the tires on the ground, at least when I needed them to be, where the DR650, you can just see the ground sort of popping the tires up just at random, which obviously makes keeping traction pretty hard. And while the soil conditions were a little bit different from one video to the next, I right away said that the DR650 just felt really messy and not confidence inspiring going up that hill.
Oh yeah, certainly messier than the than the XR. Weird.
I also did quite a few videos on the other new 2025 model bikes that were coming out, which really was kind of fun, and a lot of them actually did quite well, and it seems like that is a pretty good time to do that type of video since I'm not really able to ride a whole lot then. But before that and before the leaves fell, we did get one more ride in. We took both the XR and the DR to the Knobby Ridge single track, and as much fun as it was to try to get both of those bikes through the 2-mile loop at Tigerton, the Knobby Ridge trails are probably a little bit more suited to the bigger, heavier bikes, And if you guys remember back 2 years ago, my dad and I actually took both the Gen 3 KLR 650 and the Tenere 700 through those trails. And honestly, I don't know what happened between then and now. I think we're just both riding a little bit less. But we really kind of had a hard time getting both of these bikes through those trails. I think with stops, it ended up taking us almost 2 hours. But it still really was a pretty fun experience and a good ride. And I think the biggest takeaway from that was how much better the XR seemed to handle trails that, well, required a little bit more precise riding.
Well, what do you think? What are your parting thoughts about the bikes?
On the single track, I like the XR better.
Yeah, I think I do too. Just marginally, but there's just a few little things that just make it easier and more fun to ride.
As much as we maybe initially thought that it had something to do with the geometry of those bikes, and I think maybe it does, the XR just seems to kind of, I don't know, be a little bit more precise, where the DR, it's just when you turn the bars, it seems like the whole bike just kind of sways. But now I'm thinking that may actually have something to do with the suspension. And I guess, again, we won't really know until I get that bike upgraded. But it was definitely kind of an eye-opening experience. And I really have enjoyed being able to ride both of these bikes, one right after the other. And being able to swap with somebody else has really just kind of taken that to a whole nother level. And it seems like you guys really enjoy that too. So we definitely plan on doing a lot more of that in the future. And after that, things definitely started to cool off a bit and the leaves were all on the ground, but we still had some time to go up and mess around in the mud with the new Tusk 2-track tires that my dad and I spooned on the Tenere 700. We took both that bike and his much different, much lighter Super Sherpa 250 up on the same circuit that we tested the Waypoint tires on the XR. And again, we really enjoyed riding around on the twisty roads, the gravel, and the mud.
Oh gosh, I thought I was going to watch you dump it.
No. Whoa.
One way or the other.
Bit of skating around though. Yeah, I mean, for as heavy as this thing is, I mean, I don't know that you can really expect that much more, and you certainly wouldn't think you could for as good as they are on the road.
And then just at the beginning of this week, actually, we took the 701 Enduro and the DR650 up to a really, really, really neat tract of land that doesn't actually have any specific trails. It's just open to motor vehicles year round. So we thought we'd be riding in a bit of snow. It turned out we were actually riding on hard packed ice, and that will be the next video that I edit and that you guys see. But that basically wraps 2024 up. It's been an amazing year. I'm definitely feeling a little bit better about how things are going now, although I do still have a bit of anxiety about this just because it is such a different career path than I ever thought that I would be on. When I was working at my engineering job for those 12 years, I just always thought I would sort of end up retiring from there, and that would be about it. I would just ride motorcycles on the side. But after we had our second kid, I think I just realized that there really just wasn't going to be a way to work 40 hours for somebody else, spend time with my kids, and then still have time for this. And I am so glad that things worked out this way, and looking back on it all now, it really does just seem like maybe this was the plan from the get-go, and I am so incredibly thankful for that. I love being able to be around my family so much more. On top of that, being able to do a job that incorporates basically everything that I love: riding motorcycles, being in the woods, editing videos, helping people. I mean, it just doesn't get any better than that for me. So I am so thankful to all of you guys. I am so thankful to God that I am on this path. I mean, I cannot believe, and I don't think if you told me, you know, even 2 years ago that this is where I would be right now, oh man, I don't think I ever would have believed you. I mean, it's been such an amazing year. So thanks for watching. Take care, stay safe, stay swanky, get out and enjoy this beautiful world God created any chance you get. And if you can't do that right now, here's more videos to check out. In the meantime, we'll catch you on the next one.
I can't believe you ride with me at all anymore. It's never boring.
Good riding together.
It is. It's great. Actually, I get that a lot. People say that they wish they could have ridden with their dad, or hope they could, you know, be able to ride with their kids or whatever. And yeah, we don't think about it much just because that's what we've always known. But we are very, very blessed to be able to do this.